Hello everyone, and welcome to ASMR Ghost Stories. If you enjoy getting just a little bit scared of the paranormal, you've come to the right channel. All of my stories are either soft spoken or whispered. So before you put your headphones on, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, the like button to let me know that you're enjoying the content, and hit the notification bell because I do upload twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. So let's go ahead and jump in. Borley Rectory. Say that 5 times fast. The most haunted house in England. It was the well-known psychical research Dr. Harry Price who applied the title of the most haunted house in England to Borley Rectory, located 60 miles northeast of London on the Essex-Suffolk border. Over the years, the claim of most haunted has been contested and the case has become controversial, but the old accounts of the occupants and the teams of researchers still make for chilling reading. According to one of the legends of Borley, shortly after Reverend Guy E. Smith arrived to take over clerical duties at the rectory in 1928, he opened a cabinet in the library to put away some books and saw a human skull grinning at him from the shelf. Miss Smith held her breath as her husband removed the skull from the cabinet and began to examine it. You don't suppose, she asked with nervous laughter, that the rectory really is haunted? You don't think that could be a skull of a nun that's supposed to walk through these halls, or the skull of one of the poor devils that was buried in the plague pit? Smith cautioned his wife to calm down before she convinced herself that all the weird tales they had heard about the rectory were true. Still, it was difficult to deny the fact that no fewer than a dozen clergymen refused to live there before he accepted the call. Nor could he forget the story about a former rector who had a window in the dining room bricked up because he could not stand to see the ghost of a nun continually peering in at him. Reverend Smith tried to ignore his wife's suggestion that something evil had made its abode in the rectory. He and the church sexton gave the skull a solemn burial in the churchyard, and he and his wife fought to stave off the depression that seemed to have enveloped them. However, it was not many nights before they were given awesome evidence of invisible forces at work. The haunting phenomena usually began shortly after they had retired for the evening. They would be lying in bed and they would hear the sound of heavy footsteps walking past their door. On several nights, Smith crouched in the darkness outside of their room with a hockey stick clasped firmly in his hands, trying to lunge at the invisible something that passed their door. But he was never able to strike anything tangible. A female voice began moaning from the center of an archway that led to the chapel. Keys were dislodged from their locks and were found several feet from their doors. Hoarse, inaudible whispers sounded over their beds. Small pebbles appeared out of nowhere and pelted them. When the Smiths reported their supernatural plight to the London Daily Mirror, Dr. Harry Price was notified. In the summer of 1929, Price, his secretary, and C.V. Watts, a reporter reporter for the Mirror, set out to visit the rectory and to see for themselves if Reverend Smith and his family were truly beset by the authentic haunting phenomena. Before the trio left London, their research revealed that the rectory, though constructed in modern times, stood on the site of a medieval monastery. There had once been a nunnery close at hand, and its ruins were still visible. There were many legends about the nunnery, but the most famous was about a nun who had been set into one of the convent walls while she was still alive as punishment for eloping with a Benedictine brother who was later hanged for his indiscretion. Occupants of the rectory and several villagers had reported seeing the ghost of the veiled nun walking through the grounds. About a quarter of a mile away stood a castle where many tragic events had also occurred, ending with the siege by Oliver Cromwell. A headless nobleman and a black coach pursued by armed men had also been listed as frequent phenomena around the rectory. Borley Rectory was built by the Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull in 1863, although some sources say 1865. The Reverend had fathered 14 children and needed a larger home. Bull died in the rectory's blue room in 1892 and was succeeded in occupancy by his son Harry, who died in the rectory in 1927. As a dozen clergymen refused to take up residence at the rectory because of the eerie tales they had heard, the building was vacant for several months until Reverend Smith and his family accepted the call in 1928. After Price, his secretary, and C.V. Watts arrived at the rectory, they had lunch with Reverend Smith and his wife and listened to the couple describe the range of psychic phenomena that they had witnessed. While they spoke, a glass candlestick struck an iron stove near Prince's head and showered him with splinters. A mothball came rolling down the stairwell, followed by a number of pebbles. During his stay at the rectory, Price busied himself with research, conducting interviews with the surviving daughters of Reverend Henry Bull, the builder of the rectory, and former servants who had remained in the village. A man who had served as a gardener for Reverend Bull told Prince that while he had worked at the rectory, both he and his wife heard footsteps in their rooms over the stables. The sounds were audible every night for the 8 months he worked there. Several former maids testified that they had remained in the employ of the Bulls for only 1 or 2 days before they were driven away by the strange occurrences. The eldest of Bull's 3 surviving daughters said she had seen the nun appear at a lawn party on a sunny July afternoon in 1900. She had attempted to approach the phantom and engage it in conversation, but it disappeared as she had drawn near to it. The sisters all swore that the entire family had often seen the nun and the phantom coach. It was their father who had bricked up the dining room window so that the family might enjoy dinner without the spectral nun peering in at them. Mrs. Smith said that she had also seen the shadowy figure of a nun walking about the grounds of the rectory. On several occasions, she had attempted to confront the phantom, but it always disappeared. Before the investigators left the Smiths, Watts wrote an article for the Daily Mirror in which he admitted that he had seen the phantom nun and heard the sound of the ghostly carriage and horses' hooves for himself. The Smiths left the rectory shortly after the investigators concluded their research. Both Mr. and Mrs. Smith had begun to suffer the ill effects from lack of sleep and the enormous mental strain that had been placed on them. The supernatural phenomenon reached new heights of activity when the Reverend Lionel Algernon Foister, his wife Mary Ann, and their 4-year-old daughter Adelaide established residence in the rectory on October 16, 1930. Reverend Foister was the cousin of Carolyn Foister Bull, the wife of Reverend Henry Bull, so he must have had some idea what dreaded things they might face in the rectory after dark. They had lived there only a few days when Mrs. Foister heard a voice softly calling, "Mary Ann, dear." Thinking her husband was summoning her, Mrs. Foister ran upstairs. Foister told his wife that he had not spoken a word, but that he had also heard a voice calling. On one occasion, Mary Ann Foister set her wristwatch by her side as she prepared to wash her hands in the bathroom. When she finished washing, she reached for the watch and discovered that the band had been removed. It disappeared and never again reappeared. When Reverend Foister realized that the tales that he had heard about Borley Rectory had all been true, he was not frightened, for he believed that he would be protected by his Christian faith. He used a holy relic to quiet the disturbances when they became particularly violent, and he remained calm enough to keep a detailed journal of all the phenomena that he and his wife witnessed. For some unknown reason, Mary Ann Foister became the brunt of the most cruel and sadistic facets of the haunting. While on the way to their bedroom, she sustained a violent blow to her eye that slashed her skin and left a large black bruise that was visible for several days. On another occasion, she narrowly missed being struck by a flat iron that shattered the chimney of the lamp that she was carrying. Strangely enough, while one facet of the haunting persecuted Mrs. Foister, another seemed desperate to establish contact with her. Messages were found scrawled on the walls. "Mary Ann, please help." When Reverend Foister learned that Dr. Harry Price had once shown an interest in the Borley phenomena, he wrote to London to inform the psychical researcher of renewed activity in the rectory. Upon arrival, Price and his 2 assistants once again set about examining the house from attic to cellar. While Price was in an upstairs room, an empty wine bottle was suddenly thrown through the air by an invisible force and narrowly missed him. Shortly after that welcoming salvo from the haunting, the investigators were startled to hear the screams of their chauffeur, who had remained behind in the kitchen to enjoy a leisurely cigarette. The frightened man insisted that he had seen a large black hand crawl across the kitchen floor. Reverend Foister showed Price the entry he had made in the journal on March 28th, when his wife had confronted a grotesque entity while ascending a staircase. She had described it as a black, ape-like monstrosity. It had reached out, touched her on the shoulder with an iron-like touch. Price soon learned that others had seen the creature on different occasions. The Foisters also told Price and his team that the haunting had begun to materialize items that they knew were not theirs. A small tin trunk had appeared in the kitchen when they were eating supper. A powder box that contained a wedding ring manifested in the bathroom, and after the Foisters had carefully put the ring away in a drawer, it disappeared overnight. In his book, The Most Haunted House in England, Price documented more than 2,000 instances of paranormal activity, that occurred during the Foysters' residency in the rectory. The Foysters endured the supernatural harassment for 5 years before leaving Borley Rectory in October 1935. After the Foysters left, the bishop wisely decreed the parish decreed that the place should be put up for sale. It should have come as no surprise to the parish to discover that there would be no interested parties waiting in line to bid on it. In May of 1937, Harry Price learned that the rectory was once again vacant and offered to lease the place so that he could create a kind of ghost laboratory. His proposed sum was accepted, and the psychical investigator enlisted a crew of 40 men who would take turns living in the rectory for a period of 1 year. Price outfitted the place with special ghost detecting equipment and prepared a booklet of instructions that told his army of researchers how to correctly observe and record any phenomena that might manifest. Shortly after Price's crew began to arrive, strange messages that seemed to have been written in pencil began to materialize on the walls. Each time a new marking was discovered, it was carefully circled and dated. 2 Oxford graduates reported actually seeing the formation of a new message while they were busy cataloging another. It appeared that the entity missed Mary Ann Foyster. Quote, unquote, Mary Ann. Mary Ann. M, it wrote over and over. Mary Ann. Light. Mass. Prayers. Get lights. Mary Ann. Please. Help. Get. Professor C.E.M. Joad of the Department of Philosophy and Psychology at the University of London was one of those who witnessed the pencil markings appear on the walls. In the July 1938 issue of Harper's Magazine, Joad commented on his experience. Quote, having reflected long and carefully upon that squiggle, I did not and do not see how it could have been made by normal means. The hypothesis that poltergeists materialized lead pencils and fingers to use them seems to be totally incredible, and the question of why seems hardly less difficult to answer than the question how, as so frequently occurs when one is investigating so-called abnormal phenomena. One finds it equally impossible to withhold credence from the facts or to credit any possible explanation of the facts. Either the facts did not occur, or if they did, the universe must be in some respects be totally other than what one is accustomed to suppose. End quote. The investigators soon discovered a cold spot in one of the upstairs passages. Although this is a common aspect of haunting phenomena, it had gone unnoticed in previous explorations by the psychical researchers and the rectors who had lived in Borley. Certain of Price's investigators noted that they shivered and felt faint whenever they passed through it. Another cold spot was discovered on the landing outside of the Blue Room. Thermometers indicated the temperature of these areas to be fixed at 48 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of what the temperature may have been in the rest of the house. On the last day of Price's tenancy, the wedding ring that had materialized during the Foysters' occupancy once again appeared. To be certain that the ghost would not snatch it away again, the investigators brought it home to London with him. In late 1938, Borley Rectory was purchased by a Captain W. H. Gregson, who renamed it the Priory. He was not at all intimidated by stories that the place was haunted, but he was upset when his faithful old dog went wild with terror on the day they moved in and ran away, never to be seen again. He was also somewhat concerned with the strange track of unidentified footprints that circled the house in freshly fallen snow. The captain swore that they were not made by any human or animal. He followed the tracks in an attempt to figure out how they had been made, but they mysteriously disappeared into nothingness. On February the 27th, 1939, Borley Rectory was completely destroyed by flames. Captain Gregson later identified that a number of books had flown from their places on shelves and knocked over a lamp, which led to an immediate explosion of flames. In December 2000, a book was published with the controversial title, We Faked the Ghosts of Borley Rectory. In this expose, Louis Mayerling claimed that Harry Price, a host of other cyclical researchers in the world at large, had been taken in by hoaxers who took special delight in making Borley Rectory appear haunted. Mayerling stated that Borley Rectory had been a second home to him in his younger days. He had been but a lad when he first arrived at Borley Rectory in 1918 and discovered Reverend Harry Bull and his family having great fun perpetrating the local folklore about a phantom nun and other things that went bump in the night. According to the author, the Foresters later got in on the spooky pranks and encouraged Mayerling to don a black cape and stalk the gardens at dusk. Mayerling revealed how those in on the hoax took great delight in ringing bells, tossing pebbles, and making eerie groans and moans. However, he did admit to one incident that he could not explain, which might indicate that there really was something paranormal occurring at Borley Rectory. On Easter Sunday in 1935, a prestigious group of individuals who believed that paranormal phenomena was occurring at Borley Rectory joined Mayerling and Marianne Foister for a seance at the rectory. Among those in attendance were the acclaimed playwright George Bernard Shaw, T.E. Lawrence, the heroic Lawrence of Arabia, Sir Montague Norman, Governor of the Bank of England, and Bernard Spilsbury, a criminal forensic scientist for the Home Office. According to Mayerling, the kitchen bells all clanged, and a brilliant silver-blue light seemed to emanate from the walls and the ceiling, leaving them completely surrounded. From his previous experience as a ghostly imposter, Mayerling knew that it was impossible to cause all of the bells to sound at once, and he had absolutely no idea what could have caused the brilliant lightning-like flash. He admitted that he was, in fact, blinded by the strange phenomena and eventually recovered sight in only one of his eyes. Shaw and Norman refused to stay the night after such a violent supernatural display, and Mayerling confessed in his book that the memory of that occurrence still unnerved him. In spite of Mayerling's confession that he participated in creating the alleged phenomenon at Borley Rectory, the haunting remains controversial and a subject of debate among cyclical researchers. Although Mayerling may have joined the Bull family in perpetuating the legends of the rectory, and later encouraged the Foresters to play along with the hoax, the admitted pranksters were not present during the years of Reverend G. E. Smith's residency. The year-long observation of extensive phenomena by Price's team of researchers, or the manifestations reported by Gregson after he assumed ownership of Borley Rectory. And that concludes our story of the day. I'm always fascinated when a story opens up and it says it's the most haunted place. So it's the most haunted restaurant, it's the most haunted cemetery. Who decides on if it's the most haunted? Any haunting makes it the most haunted, I think. So if this case were real, I'd have to say the most disturbing part of it would be just having a nice meal and you look up and you see a nun staring in at you. I'm sorry. I think I probably would have choked on my meal right there. Not a fan. I don't like that feeling of being watched. So to actually have a nun, was it real? Was it not? Who knows? And who's to say? Because all the people that are in this story are probably, obviously, long gone. So if the rectory, I need to research it and see if something else was built in its place and see if there's any stories since then. But I will include on the thumbnail, if you look closely, go back and look at the thumbnail, and it is the writings that were found on the wall that they took pictures, and it says, if I look below the thing here, it says strange messages were written on the walls of Borley Rectory, reportedly by the spirits that inhabited the house. Investigators tried to communicate with the spirits by writing messages back, seen here in large capital letters. Responses would often appear written in pencil, although they were not always legible. Interesting. So what do you think of the picture? And what do you think of the story? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below if you have a story that you would like read in a future video. Comment below or email me. My email is in the description below. So hit that subscribe button, the like, and the notification bell. And until then, stay just a little scared. Until then.